Nursery smelled like fresh paint and lavender, and for exactly 47 minutes that Sunday morning, everything in my life felt like it was exactly where it was supposed to be. I had the crib assembled. The mobile was hung. Little white clouds and wooden stars my mother had driven 3 hours to help me find at a craft fair in Asheville. My husband was downstairs making coffee, and I could hear him humming something I didn't recognize, which was such a him thing to do. The walls were a soft sage green because we'd argued about it for 2 weeks, and finally agreed that neither yellow nor gray felt right, and sage felt like hope. I was 31, 7 months pregnant, and genuinely happy. I want to say that clearly because everything that came after has a way of coloring the before. But that morning was real. That happiness was real. My husband. I'll just call him my husband because that title still carries weight even now. Had grown up in Raleigh, old money, the kind that doesn't announce itself, but is always present in how people hold themselves. His mother, Helen, had been widowed young and poured everything into him and his older sister. I'd known going in that Helen was particular. My husband had warned me, gently more than once, in the way people warn you about weather in a place they love. Just bring an umbrella. It usually passes. I was a pediatric occupational therapist. I had a master's degree and a caseload of 32 kids, and a laugh that my own mother always said could fill a gymnasium. I was not, by any reasonable measure, someone who needed protecting. But I was also a girl from a small town in western North Carolina, whose father drove a delivery truck for 29 years, and whose mother had worked the front desk at a dental office until she retired. My parents were warm, loud, deeply funny people who said grace before dinner and kept a swear jar and had celebrated every milestone of my life like it was a national holiday. Helen had met them twice before the baby shower. The first time was at our engagement dinner, which Helen hosted at her house, a 4,000 square foot colonial in a neighborhood where the lawns are manicured by people who are paid not to be seen. My mother brought a peach pie. Helen accepted it with a smile I would later learn to read, the one that meant she had already decided something. The second time was Thanksgiving at our apartment, which my mother complimented so genuinely and specifically. "I love how you did the curtains, honey. That fabric is just beautiful," that I almost cried. Helen sat at the table and asked my father thoughtful questions about his work, and laughed at his jokes, and was genuinely pleasant. I thought maybe I'd misread her. I hadn't. The baby shower was my mother-in-law's idea. That was the first thing. She offered, and my husband looked at me with those hopeful eyes, and I said yes because saying no would have required an explanation I didn't have yet. The shower would be at Helen's house. She knew the right people, she said. She knew how to do these things. She said it the way someone might say they knew how to perform surgery, with a quiet implication that you did not. I made one request. One. I asked that the backdrop, the decorative backdrop for photos, the thing guests would stand in front of all afternoon, include my baby's name. We had chosen the name together, my husband and I, over 3 weeks of lists and conversations and one very long drive back from the beach where we'd talked about names until the sun went down. We had landed on Maeve Elizabeth, the middle name for my grandmother who had passed 2 years earlier and who I still reached for the phone to call sometimes. I asked Helen if the backdrop could say, "Welcome, Maeve." She said of course. She said it would be beautiful. I believed her. The morning of the shower, my husband left early to help set up. He kissed me on the forehead and said he'd see me there, and I spent 2 hours getting ready with my best friend Tara, who did my hair and told me I looked like a Renaissance painting and made me laugh hard enough that I had to redo my mascara. My parents arrived at Helen's house the same time I did. My mother was wearing the blue dress she'd bought specifically for this day. She'd sent me a picture of it 3 weeks ago with a text that said, "Too much? Be honest." It was not too much. It was perfect. My father had gotten a haircut. The house was full of flowers. Helen had hired someone, clearly because the arrangements were architectural, not the kind you love, but the kind you admire. There were small white chairs arranged in rows on the back lawn, and a long table with food I didn't recognize, and a woman circling with a tray of something sparkling. I saw the backdrop before I saw Helen. It was beautiful, actually. Pale green and white, with greenery and roses, exactly the aesthetic we'd talked about. And in large, elegant script across the center, it said, "Welcome, baby Holloway." Holloway is Helen's maiden name. It is not my last name. It is not my husband's last name. Our last name is Mercer. I stood there for a moment just reading it, the way you read something twice when it doesn't make sense the first time. Welcome, baby Holloway, Tara said, quietly, next to me. Is that? Yeah, I said. My mother had seen it too. I watched her face do a small, careful thing. The thing she does when she's deciding not to react. When she's protecting me from her own reaction. My father hadn't noticed yet. He was already shaking hands with someone near the food table, laughing at something. Helen appeared from the kitchen doorway, arms open, wearing a cream blazer and her signature pearls. There she is, she said, and hugged me in a way that required me to receive it. You look wonderful. Are you happy with everything? The backdrop says Holloway, I said. She tilted her head, just slightly. It's a family name, she said. It's been in the family for generations. I thought it was a lovely touch. We chose Maeve, I said. Oh, but you haven't announced anything officially yet, she said. I didn't want to presume. That was the sentence. I've turned it over many times since. I didn't want to presume. She had organized this entire event. She had chosen the flowers and the food and the chairs and the woman with the sparkling drinks. She had presumed everything, except my daughter's name. That one thing she had decided not to presume, or rather, had decided to override. I found my husband near the back lawn. He was talking to his uncle, and he looked relaxed, and when he saw me, he smiled. I pulled him a few steps away. Did you know about the backdrop? I asked. Something crossed his face. Not surprise. She mentioned she was going to do a family name thing, he said. I thought she meant like a banner or something small. She put Holloway on it. Okay, that's... He stopped. Ran a hand through his hair. That's a lot. My parents are here, I said. My mother saw it. I'll talk to her, he said. I watched him cross the lawn toward his mother. I watched them have a short conversation. I watched his body language, the slight slope of the shoulders, the nodding, and I knew, before he came back, what he was going to say. She's already paid for it, he said when he returned. It's already printed, it's already hung, there's nothing to. I understand, I said. She means well, he said. I looked at him for a long moment. He was a good man. I want to be clear about that. He was genuinely a good man who loved me, and who was standing in a spot he didn't know how to get out of. But he also, in that moment, chose his discomfort over my parents' dignity, over my daughter's name. And that was a choice, even if he didn't experience it as one. Okay, I said. We went back to the party. For the first hour, I was present in the functional sense. I opened gifts and said the right things and let people photograph me and ate the food I didn't recognize and was gracious. Because my mother raised me to be gracious even when it costs you something. My parents stayed close. My father made a joke about baby furniture that got the whole table laughing. My mother held my hand for a minute when we were standing near the hydrangeas. It's a beautiful party, she said. Yeah, I said. Don't let it get to you today, she said very quietly. She doesn't get to have today. My mother is 63 years old and has been dealing with women like Helen her entire life and has never, not once, let them see her bend. I have always admired this about her. I aspire to it. The moment came about 90 minutes in. Helen had organized a little program, remarks from family, a blessing from her pastor friend, and then a moment for the mother-to-be to say a few words. This is apparently something that happens at the kind of shower Helen throws. I had not been warned, but I had also learned to expect the unexpected when Helen was hosting. She handed me the microphone, an actual microphone because the lawn was large, with a smile that was warm and genuine and completely untroubled. The smile of a woman who had no idea anything was wrong or had decided that nothing was, which amounted to the same thing. I held it for a second. My parents were sitting in the second row, my mother in her blue dress, my father with his careful haircut. Tara was to my right, and her eyes said, "Whatever you're about to do, I'm here." My husband was standing at the edge of the tent, watching me. I thought about what my mother had said. She doesn't get to have today. No, I thought, she doesn't. Thank you, I said into the microphone, and the lawn went quiet. Helen, you've put together something truly beautiful today. The flowers, the food, the details. You have a gift for this, and I mean that sincerely. Helen smiled. I also want to take a moment, I said, to acknowledge the people who made me. I turned to face my parents directly. My dad worked 30 years so that I could go to college and never feel the weight of that. He never complained. He showed up to every recital and every graduation and every unremarkable Tuesday with the same amount of love, and I am so grateful to be his daughter. My father looked like he was going to cry, which meant I had about 45 seconds before I was going to cry too. And my mom. I stopped for a second. My mom taught me what it looks like to hold your head up in a room where people have decided you're less than. She never taught me bitterness. She taught me how to know your worth so clearly that other people's opinions of it just don't land. I heard Tara make a small sound next to me. This baby, I said, is going to have a name that her grandparents, all of her grandparents, know and love. Her name is Maeve. Maeve Elizabeth Mercer. The Elizabeth Mercer my grandmother, Bess, who I miss every single day and who would have spoiled this child absolutely rotten. I looked out at the faces on the lawn. Some of them were Helen's people, women in blazers with white wine, and some of them were mine. The expressions were varied. Helen's face had gone very still. The smile from before suspended somewhere it had stopped meaning anything. I also want to share something we haven't announced yet, I said, because I think today is exactly the right moment. My husband went very still at the edge of the tent. I've already filed the paperwork, I said. The birth certificate will say Maeve Elizabeth Mercer. I took care of it on Thursday, actually, just to be sure, because I know how important names are to everyone in this room. I paused. Some of us just have different ideas about which names matter. The lawn was completely silent. Thank you for being here to celebrate her, I said, and handed the microphone back to Helen's event coordinator and went to sit down next to my mother, who took my hand without saying a word. The party continued for another 40 minutes. These things always do. People eat and talk and fill the spaces between them with pleasantries because the alternative is acknowledging what just happened, and most people aren't equipped for that in real time. Helen did not come to speak to me. My husband came and crouched next to my chair and said, very quietly, "That was 'I heard you.'" And I looked at him and said, "Good." And he nodded and went back to being a host because that was also a choice, and he made it. My parents left first. I walked them to their car and my dad hugged me for a long time and said, "Kid, your grandmother would have stood up and cheered." And that was the one that broke me a little, just around the edges. But I kept it together until they drove away, and then I let Tara walk me to her car and I sat in the passenger seat and breathed for about 3 minutes. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I think so," I said. "The birth certificate thing," she said. "Was that true?" "Yes," I said. "I filed it Thursday." She was quiet for a second. "You knew she was going to do something." "I suspected," I said. "I just didn't know what." The drive home was quiet. My husband and I didn't fight that night, which surprised me. We sat on the couch and talked in the way you talk when something has cracked and you're both examining the crack honestly for the first time. He said he should have pushed back harder. He said he had told himself it was small because it was easier to believe it was small. He said he was sorry. I believed him, mostly, which is not the same as the crack not being there. Helen called the next morning. I let it go to voicemail. The message was 4 minutes long and covered a lot of ground. Hurt feelings, good intentions, the importance of family heritage, a reference to how much she had spent on the flowers. I listened to it twice and then I texted my husband a single sentence. "I'd like us to have a conversation with her together, with a counselor present, before I respond." He agreed. I don't know that I expected him to, but he did. That conversation happened 6 weeks later, after Maeve was born. She was 8 pounds, 2 ounces, with her father's ears and my mother's stubborn little chin, and she arrived at 7 in the morning on a Thursday in October, like she had somewhere to be. My parents were in the waiting room when she was born. Helen arrived 2 hours later. I had made sure of that timing deliberately, and I don't apologize for it. The counselor sessions were hard and useful, the way hard things usually are. Helen said, at one point, that she had only ever wanted to welcome the baby into the family. The counselor asked her whose family she meant. There was a long silence after that. We are still figuring it out. I won't pretend it resolved cleanly, because it didn't. Helen is May's grandmother, and she loves her, and that matters. She is also a woman who will always have strong opinions about how things should be done, and who gets to decide, and that is something we are going to be navigating for the rest of our lives, probably. But on the afternoon, the four of us came home from the hospital. Me, my husband Maeve, and set her down in the sage green nursery, with the white clouds and the wooden stars. My mother's voice on the phone said, "How does it feel?" And I looked at my daughter, who was already squinting in that exact way my father squints, and I said, "It feels like exactly what it is. A beginning. Ours." I thought a lot about the moment I stood on that lawn holding a microphone I hadn't asked for, looking at a backdrop that had my daughter's name wrong and decided to do something about it anyway. What strikes me now isn't the anger. The anger was easy. What strikes me is that I almost didn't say anything. I almost smiled and held my belly and took the photographs and let Helen have what she'd taken. Because that's what you're trained to do. Absorb it, smooth it over, protect everyone in the room from the discomfort of the truth. I had been practicing that particular skill my whole life, and I was very good at it. But here's what I've come to understand. There's a difference between being kind and being compliant. My mother knew that difference. She had been teaching it to me since I was old enough to watch how she carried herself in rooms where she was underestimated. She never taught me to be cruel, or loud, or sharp for the sake of it. She taught me to know what I was worth so completely that I didn't need anyone else to confirm it. That's a kind of moral clarity that doesn't announce itself, it just holds, quietly, until the moment it has to. What Helen did that day was monstrous. That's actually the harder truth to sit with. She was a woman who loved her son and had a certain vision of what family meant, and had never, probably, been asked to examine whose vision counted more. The consequences she faced, the strained silence, the counseling sessions, the slow rebuilding of something that had cracked, those weren't punishments I handed down. They were just the natural weight of choices that had been made. Hers, and my husband's, and yes, mine too, because every time I had let something pass without naming it, I had helped build the conditions for that afternoon. I don't regret what I said at the microphone. I do wish I had said smaller versions of it earlier, so it never had to come to that. That's the thing about avoiding hard conversations. You think you're keeping the peace, but you're really just storing up the thing that will eventually have to be said anyway, except louder, in front of more people, with more at stake. The birth certificate was already filed. I had done it on a Thursday, quietly, at the county clerk's office, because some part of me had known. That's not cunning. It's just paying attention. It's what happens when you stop telling yourself that the person in front of you is different from their pattern. My daughter's name was mine to protect, and I protected it by being prepared, rather than by being reactive. Maeve is almost 2 now. She says Baba from my father and Mimi from my mother, and she squints exactly like him. Still, every time the light is too bright, Helen calls her by her right name. Things are not perfect between us, but they are honest, which is a better foundation than the one we had before. I think about what I want to hand down to her. Not money, not connections, not any particular address or last name. I want her to know how to tell the truth gently, and how to hold a line without losing her warmth, and how to walk into a room that has decided something about her and simply, quietly, decide differently. Those are the things my mother gave me. They are the things that got me through that afternoon. She'll have her own version of that afternoon someday. Most people do. I just hope that when she's holding the microphone, she already knows what she's worth.